Bună dimineața! Stimată doamna rector, Victoria Melnic, stimate domn prim-prorector, Paul Gamurar, onorată asistență, dragi oaspeți, stimați colegi, bine ați venit la Conferința Științifică Internațională, Învățământul artistic-dimensiuni culturale a Academiei de Muzică, Teatru și Arte Plastice. A devenit tradiție pentru instituția noastră organizarea acestui eveniment științific în vinerea sărbătorii de Florii. Ne bucură participarea cadrelor didactice, savanților din diferite instituții din țară și de peste hotarele ei. Salutăm colegii noștri din România, Ucraina, Germania, Belarus, Federația Rusă. Am toată certitudinea că această reuniune va provoca comunitatea științifică spre noi cercetări într-o valorificare a patrimoniului cultural național și internațional, eficientizarea vieții culturale în spațiul european. Într-un ceas bun. Good morning, dear Mrs. Rector Victoria Melnic, Mr. Vice Rector Paul Gamurar, honorable audience, dear guests, dear colleagues, welcome to the International Scientific Conference, Artistic Education, Cultural Dimension, held at the Academy of Music, Theatre and Fine Arts. It has become a tradition to our Academy to organize this seventh scientific event on Friday of the Feast of the Flowers. We are pleased to see the participation of teachers, scientists from various institutions of our country and from abroad. We welcome our colleagues from Romania, Ukraine, Germany, Belarus, and the Russian Federation. I am confident that this meeting will encourage the scientific community to new research of the national and international cultural heritage and the efficiency of the cultural life in the European space. We are welcome. We offer the greeting word to Miss Victoria Melnic, Doctor of the Arts, University Professor, Master of Arts, Rector of the Academy of the Music, Theatre and the Fine Arts. Welcome, Mrs. Rector.
Good morning, dear colleagues. I greet you warmly and thank you all for responding to the invitation to attend our traditional conference, Artistic Education, Cultural Dimension. This year, the conference will feature 9 plenary reports and 7 papers in the 3 sections: music, theater, fine arts, and humanity. At the conference, we have participants from 5 countries representing 19 institutions, 17 universities, and 2 cultural organizations. It is a happy opportunity to have an exchange of experience and opinion to get to know us better. Especially, I'd like to salute our colleague from Ukraine, which in this difficult time for the country joined our conference. I hope it will be a productive day with a lot of interesting and useful information for everyone. Good luck and inspiration to all participants.
Thank you. In order to organize the scientific conference, it is necessary to establish 2 rules of the presentation of reports. I propose up to 10 minutes per every report and 4 or 5 minutes of debate after it, so that we can conclude the plenary session at the appointed time. I am supported by most of my colleagues in this idea. Coffee breaks will follow after the conference work with carried out in section according to the program of the scientific event.
Dear colleagues, good morning, everybody. My name is Sprincean Serghei. I'm a doctor of habilitate in political sciences. So I will co-moderate this session, and I'd like to wish to everybody a good conference, prolific discussions, communication, and debates. Thank you very much. For the first speaker, I'd like to present Mrs. Rector of the Academy, Victoria Melnik, Doctor in Fine Arts, University Professor, with the communication named Authenticity in Musical Performance. For or against? Please. Have the floor.
Dear colleague, I'm not a doctor in fine arts, I'm musicologist. I'm doctor in musical arts. Yes, please. Authentic, according to the dictionary, it means real, true, reliable, that can be believed or accepted. This word is used very frequently in the context of all art. Authentic being one of the mandatory conditions for assessing the value and quality of an artistic product. But the sense of the term authenticity and its semantic field vary depend on the historical moment and the artistic field. If in the visual art the notion remains limited to the meaning revealed in the binary opposition between true and false, in the sense of an authentic Da Vinci or a copy, in music, the word authenticity, certainly present also in the context of discussion on assigning scores of a composer from the past, such as the famous Adagio by Albinoni. But it's more commonly used to evaluate works and artists on a more to less authentic scale, and which often express a subjective position of the one who makes the assessment. Since the musical works, since the musical work does not fully identify with the score, it comes to life only in the act of interpretation. The problem of authenticity arises especially in this context, even if authentic must be any newly composed piece, but also any interpretation of known works on once composed. However, nowadays, this concept is most often associated with the interpretation of ancient music, especially Baroque music, as an alternative to classical romantic interpretation of the same repertoire considered inauthentic, but it can be applied to any other music. Authenticity starts from the idea that because the effect of music is a product of the momentary circumstance, to faithfully reproduce the concept of the composer, the performer must replicate the style of interpretation from the time the musical piece was written, reconstituting as much as possible all musical practice on that period. Adherent to this current have a starting point, the original of the musical work, using facsimile edition of old music that require special reading skills because they involve more than just sounding the note, becoming becoming practically a recomposition of music, because most of the information needed by the performer was implied without being noted in the score. In his treatise on the art of flute playing quants note that the score contained only 1/3 of what should be present in real music. The tempos, ornament, type of articulation, and other detail were left to the discretion of the performer, who were sufficiently informed of all this to cope without the tutelage of the composer. We can easily guess what will happen if this music is performed by an ignorant musician. Meanwhile, the practice of contemporary performance and the experience gained by musicians following today's study does not familiarize them with what was once considered self-evident. Authenticity is most evident in the use of so-called historical musical instruments, many of which are obsolete, such as viola da gamba, baroque violin, vihuela, longitudinal flute, harpsichord, hammer piano, natural trumpet, theorba, arpeggione, harmonica, and others. Authenticity also includes the interpretation of high vocal parts, female, written for castrated singers or for boys' voice, by male voice, contratenor. Of course, we can know exactly how the piece were played or singed when they were composed. We can only suppose how the instrument really sounded because the meantime, the tuning and the material for which they are made have changed. Critics of authenticism have spread the view that all instruments sound out of the tune or do not hold the tune for long. And proponents of authenticity in response emphasize the need of the correct use of all instruments appropriate to the music itself, and which the disadvantage turn in advantage. Next, please. The next one. Will research date the authentic performance style to the middle of the last century? It actually appears at the end of 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, when all music society were established in different European countries. Next, please. His purpose was to perform this music as close as possible to the original. However, is the professor and instrument maker, next please, Arnold Dolmetsch, who is traditionally considered the founder of authenticity. His interest in early music arose after examining the historical instrument kept in the collection of the British Museum. Dolmetsch is also the author of the book Performing Music of the 17th-18th century, in which he expounded the theoretical foundation of the authenticism. This book has not lost its value and relevance even today, giving to the musician a complete picture of what Baroque music means, both as an interpretative practice and as a science. In order to understanding this correctly, we must distinguish between authenticism as an artistic method and authenticism as an interpretative style. In the context of the method, the problem of an authenticist interpretation is not only an artistic one, but rather a culturological one, because the interpretation of the original music text must be based on serious research. This process involves a laborious study that involves the comparative analysis of existing editions starting from facsimile or text, and requires special knowledge in the field of musical notation and textology. Authentic interpretation requires knowledge of the rule and technique of interpretation, but also the ability to improvise and accurately interpret ornaments, and in general, solid knowledge of all aspects of music practice and theory in the country and the period in which the music was written. Knowledge set out in various documents of those time. This type of interpretation cannot ignore also the particularity of the construction of the instrument. of the specific of tuning and other similar aspects. For example, unlike the Baroque violin, which use catgut string, the modern violin use metal string. The neck of the Baroque violin, it's wider and shorter, forming an almost straight line with the body. And the fingerboard is shorter and lighter compared to the modern one. The bass bar for the Baroque violin is smaller than the modern one. The bridge has a different form and size. In light of this difference, it's clear that the modern violin does not have the same sound as the Baroque violin. Each of these two instruments, thanks to its constructive feature, involves specific type of articulation. Acum vă rog slide-ul 9. The modern bow, being longer and straighter compared to the curved Baroque bow, allows to the execution of more homogeneous legato and longer phrase, including in moderate and slow tempo. The Baroque bow, shorter, on the other hand, favorize an interpretation in which legato is restricted and where fast tempo are preferred. During the Baroque period, there were also different regional variants of instrument and bow. Here is what Georg Muffat wrote about the German bow in 1691. When grasping the bow, most Germans play while pressing the hair on the bow with the thumb as required, thus having the option of digging the hair or leaving them lost, being in this sense distinguished from the Italian. The curved bow, especially the German-made bow, favor the interpretation of polyphonic music and the playing of chords abundantly present in Bach work for solo violin or cello, while the Italian one allows more easily the interpretation of monodic music and fast passage. The violin bow then in use was curved and loosely strung, enabling the performer to touch the instrument 4 strings simultaneously. Vă rog precedenta încă o dată. Today, a straight and tightly stringed bow permits the player to intone the note only successively, creating an arpeggio effect. We will discover the same difference with many other instruments: harpsichord and piano, natural and chromatic trumpet, viola da gamba, and cello. Acum vă rog 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 la rând așa. To correct this, the proponent of authenticity have proposed a new way of interpreting music, especially Baroque music, apparently more faithful, apparently more true, which no longer use a modern instrument but historical instrument on rather modern copy of them, and respectively appropriate technical procedure for their construction. The first concert of historical instrument in the early 1960s upset the audience, which was overwhelmed by this unusual song. This is now authenticity appraised as a style, which unfortunately is quite often limited to the formal fulfillment of certain conditions on historical interpretation, such as the use of old instrument. Acum 15 slide-uri, vă rog. Which today have become well-known things of the style that have led to the trivialization and even vulgarization of the discourse on authenticity, the term itself being transformed into trademark. This has led to the gradual refutation of the term authentic interpretation in favor of historically documented interpretation in serious scientific discourse, but not in the vocabulary of interpret and impress. However, the distinctive things of authenticity are not so much the instrument as the mode of interpretation. This style of interpretation involves a more flat sound, very economical vibrato, so as not to disturb the accuracy and intelligibility of the intonation, which must be in full accordance with the text. Tuning below and tempering characteristic when the tone is divided in 3 equal parts, and do dièse is no mean equal to re bemol. When a crescendo is made at the end of long note, this element together giving rise to a very different sound, often perceiving as an exaggerated manneristic, which please someone and provoke protest from others. The conductor Nicolaus Arnoncourt played an important role in promoting ancient music and in theorizing the authentic interpretation. In the middle of the 20th century, a traditional mode of interpreting Baroque music was already established and promoted by all the great conductors of the time. A large symphony orchestra composed on modern instruments was used. In Arnoncourt's opinion, any music needs its own sound provided by the instrument for which it was written. Encouraged by his credo, in 1953, he and his wife created the ensemble Consensus Musicus, whose activity was dedicated to the interpretation of ancient music on historical instruments, many of them rented at museums. The musician led by Arnoncourt draws the research of score and interpretative tricks through the interpretation and writing, but also through the pedagogical activity started in the 1960, a real revolution in the interpretation and reception of European Baroque music that changed the understanding and the appreciation of the music, both by performers and by the public. The old music, often heard as boring, starting to sound in a new way, unexpectedly fresh. This innovative approach has given new life to well-known composition, bringing to light many long-forgotten works. His revolutionary practice of historically informed interpretation revived music from the Renaissance and Baroque. The main task of any performer is to discover and transform into sound the composer's intention. Arnoncourt states that the will of the composer is for performers the supreme authority. In his opinion, the information that make it possible to understand the intention of the author are the interpretative instruction, the instrumentation, and the tradition of the interpretative practice, the knowledge and understanding of which the composer naturally demands from contemporary. This opens a wide horizon for research. Will it also create the possibility of a serious mistake if old music is played only in accordance to the knowledge gained from the book? In Arnoncourt's view, any interpretation is necessarily subjective because it derives at least as much from the historical position of the performer as from the historical position of the work itself. Of the two evils, the less evil will be a less authentic interpretation from historical point of view, but alive than an authentic and stereo one, lacking the personal and subjective vision of the performer. Along with Arnoncourt, there are other musicians who promote the historically documented interpretation of Baroque music. Gustav Leonard, Trevor Pinnock, William Christie, Philip Herreweghe, Jordi Savall, John Eliot Gardner, and many others. Of course, it is easy to play a lot of stylistically correct piece on historical instrument, but if the musician does not have the right singing, the instrument will not help him. Sure, it sounds more authentic when Bach or Scarlatti's work are played on the harpsichord, but we'll prefer a good pianist who play on a Steinway to a bad harpsichordist. It is much more important for the musician to have a clear understanding of the musical language of the piece performed than just to correctly choose the instrument on which he played. In our situation, Republic of Moldova, when we have no possibility to play historical instrument, and we can do is all we can do is try to adopt the technical possibility and modern instrument and implement some of the principles of interpretation promoted by authenticity to reproduce as accurately as possible the specific sound of Baroque music. In conclusion, we find that any interpretation that tends to be authentic must be one that is consciously assumed, combining the historical knowledge that gives it an objective foundation, placing the word sung in a specific temporal context, and at the same time cultivating the artistic personal contact with the word, which will give the necessary note of subjectivism and personality to the interpretation, differentiating it from similar ones. Thank you, and sorry for my pronunciation.
Thank you very much. It was my presentation for today's conference. I'd like to present my apologies that I presented a little bit not very correct. Dear colleagues, if you have some questions, those who are connected online, also please formulate some questions if you have. We have 3 minutes for discussions. Yeah, we have a question. Thank you.
Thank you. This is very thank you for your interesting report. I would like to ask you, especially in the 20th century and nowadays, exist two types of interpretation, as you said, of old music. The first is traditionally, authentically, with the rules of dynamics, articulation, instruments, bows, if we speak about string instruments, of that period of old music. And the second, more innovation and more democracy from performers and conductors. In your opinion, which of these two ways is better?
Dar îmi permiteți să răspund în română, fiindcă foarte greu. Eu aș zice că astăzi sunt nici nu 2, ci cel puțin 3 direcții în interpretare. Prima este această interpretare autentică, încercând să fie reprodus cât mai fidel condițiile în care a existat și a fost interpretată muzica atunci când ea a fost scrisă, pe instrumente de epocă și așa mai departe. A doua direcție este direcția, aș zice eu, așa academică sau o putem numi un fel de stilizată, când lucrările din timpurile vechi sunt interpretate pe instrumente noi, fiind adaptate la, știu eu, cerințele și canoanele estetice ale timpurilor noastre, fiind într-un fel modernizate, aduse la urechile contemporanilor noștri, așa cum ni s-ar părea că astăzi ele trebuie să fie interpretate. Această direcție s-a mai numit încă romanticistă. Și o a treia direcție o putem numi non-canonică sau individualizată, când interpretul pornește doar de la propria sa viziune a acestei muzici, indiferent că el cântă pe instrumente de epocă, ori că el cântă pe instrumente de contemporane. După cum am zis și în comunicarea mea, consider că în primul rând trebuie să fie una pe deplin asumată. Și adevărul, ca întotdeauna, este undeva la mijloc. Atunci când un interpret, înainte de a cânta o lucrare, se documentează asupra condițiilor, asupra instrumentelor, asupra celor tradiții de interpretare care erau atunci dominante în epoca în care muzica a fost scrisă. Și aici eu vorbesc nu doar despre epoca barocului. Asta se referă la muzicile din toate epocile. Deci când încearcă să reproducă cât mai fidel ceea ce compozitorul a vrut să spună, dar totuși să treacă această muzică prin prisma percepției lui personale. Atunci va fi așa o simbioză între dorința cât mai fidel de a reproduce intenția compozitorului, dar totuși să o facă personal el. Fiindcă altfel pot să apară destul de curioase situații. De exemplu, în partiturile pieselor pentru pian de Claude Debussy, tradițional nu sunt notate pedale. Deci dacă peste 300 de ani, de exemplu, se ia un interpret foarte autenticist și dornic de a reconstitui cât mai fidel această muzică de felul în care era ea interpretată, fără ca să asculte, de exemplu, interpretările de epocă, care sper eu peste 300 de ani vor fi păstrate, fiindcă astăzi noi nu avem cum să reproducem interpretările de acum 300 de ani, că nu exista posibilitate de imprimare. Astăzi noi avem această posibilitate, deci există numeroase imprimări cu interpretările pieselor de Debussy. Deci dacă el va lua doar partitura, el va cânta această muzică fără pedală, ceea ce este absolut absurd. Deci se cere și o cercetare și o viziune proprie și atunci această interpretare va fi una vie și diferită de altele și va atinge sufletele ascultătorilor. Altfel, ea pur și simplu riscă să devină una foarte corectă, dar sterilă, ceea ce nu știu dacă este interesant cuiva.
Thank you very much for your very large answer. I hope we try to answer to your question. Of course, the problem of authenticity is very large, and that this is general cultural question, not only for fine arts or for music. So next presenter in our conference will be Ludmila Lazarev, doctor in history, university associate professor, Department of Socio-Humanistic Sciences and Modern Languages, with publication Urban Landscape, Aesthetic and Identity Values. Please.
Good morning, dear colleague. Today I will speak about urban landscape, and I propose an epigraph for this study. Identity to place is like light to color. It's a quote from a recent book, Identity of Cities and Cities of Identities. Seen as a classic transdisciplinary concept, the landscape as an object of study has revealed its many facets, and making it impossible to define univocally and universally. If a first sense of the landscape is an extensive area of land regarded as being visually distinct, according to Collins' online dictionary, its current use as a cultural landscape, media landscape, political landscape, etc., is a reality. In the 20th century, with the development of human and cultural geography, emphasis is placed on the social and cultural dimension of the landscape, on the relationship between society and its living environment. Thus, the notion of urban landscape, which initially meant a kind of artistic landscape, took on a new color from an anthropological perspective. The aesthetic aspect of the landscape being integrated into its identity dimension. Urbanization and globalization are obviously two major phenomena that affect our social, economic, cultural lives, as well as our physical environment. Today, more than half of the world population lives in urban areas, a proportion expected to increase to 68% by 2050. Expansion of urban areas, increasing urban population, and the deterioration of both natural and cultural resources raise the concern on image and identity of urban landscapes. UNESCO Global Report on Culture for Sustainable Urban Development provides a wealth of insights and concrete evidence showing the power of culture as a strategic asset for creating cities that are more inclusive, creative, and sustainable. Aesthetic and identity properties of urban landscape express what connects material practices, social relation, symbolic representation, and everything that contribute to shaping a local culture. In this sense, research of the aesthetic qualities and identity of the urban landscape will highlight their importance for sustainable urban development. Supporting the former context, Rhiannon Mason clarified the criteria of realizing the cultural identity, which to be measured depending on the religion, ethnicity, gender, age. Additionally, he connected between the cultural heritage and the cultural identity through the expression sense of the place, creating an emotional rapport between the urban heritage and the local community. Mason said, "Feeling strongly and positively attached and connected to a place is an important aspect of people's identity. Identity of a given place arises from a combination of social and cultural characteristics of the related community, which reincarnated in physical shapes and forms of urban locality." Through reviewing the previous researchers in field of urban landscape in the past half century, it is evident that discussion about aesthetics in these fields have gone through changes from a visual artistic standpoint into an issue with perceptual meaning tendencies. According to Sadeghi, the urban landscape can be analyzed from two major perspectives. You can see, taking into account the visual elements, visual form elements, and cognitive conceptual elements. Visual form elements include the quality of landscape, the quality of urban building, public spaces, enclosure, diversity of form, and cognitive conceptual elements include identity, concept, mental image, richness of activities, and so on. Referring to the identity and aesthetic aspects of urban landscape, the synergy between cultural heritage and contemporary creativity, we used the comparative case study analyzing two different emblematic urban sites of Chisinau. Stephen the Great Public Garden, historical and heritage monument, and Digital Park, resident of the Dracon Industrial Park, a technology and innovation park based on the concept of developing the entrepreneurial ecosystem for the IT industry. In order to carry out the study, we identified 12 comparative criteria, among which location, general description, historical important architectural and urban transformation, historical significance, the current perception of the inhabitants, the image from a quantitative point of view, functionally characteristic image type, current use, uniqueness, and conclusion regarding the identity dimension of the spaces. We used the documentation and the observation methods to perform the analysis. You can see the table with this comparative research, and I will tell you the results of some results of this research about public garden Stephen the Great, which is a part of the national heritage and is the oldest park in Chisinau, designed and decorated in a classic way. And it is considered that it was planned in 1818, and the final form has acquired in 1835. You can see the next all this comparative study. You see the two sites and the result. Next. The public garden Stephen the Great, during his history, has several names: Alexandrovsky Park, Public Garden, and Pushkin. Its current name dates back to the 1990s. It has an area of 7 hectares. The public garden Stephen the Great is a beloved place for recreation, ride meetings for all of the Chisinau residents. In 1985, here was installed the bust of Alexander Pushkin, and in 1928, the monument of Stephen the Great. Flower-laying ceremonies are regularly performed at the pedestal of this monument on each national holidays and on days of official top and high-level visits. In 1958 was fitted the Alley of Classic with 12 busts of the classic of Romanian literature, to which in 1919 and after were joined busts of great Romanian writers of the 20th century. The public garden is a cultural and leisure space. In recent years, the image of public garden is in a state of increased degradation due to both the illegal intervention that have taken place here over the year and the lack of proper maintenance. Now the garden needs a renovation. However, it has a positive images and positive perception and remains one of the most popular parks of the city. Due to a strong historical load, which is found in the collective memory, determines the patrimonial identity values of this park. Digital park. You can see some pictures about these sites. You can see public garden Stephen the Great, and after that about picture with the digital park. I want to see some words about digital park. It's a resident of the Tracom Industrial Park located in downtown. It's an emerging alternative urban center built on the territory of the former tractor plant of Chisinau. Construction began in 2013 and was put into operation in December 2019. It is a plan to extend the project with other building. The industrial identity of the place it's important. The tractor plant has been active in this territory for 3 decades in 20th century, 1961, 1991. The current perception of the inhabitant about digital park that is an innovative project for young people, a business center. The digital park has a mixed function: economic, cultural, and event organization. Conference, training, forums, business project, festivals, fashion shows, concerts are taking place there. The uniqueness of the place consists in the modern architecture, which combine aesthetics with unique finishes, with open workspace, the first in the country, and the destination of the building as IT park. The concepts of digital park is to create an atmosphere of a Silicon Valley infrastructure in Moldova. Through its unique character, modern aesthetics aspect, multi-purpose destinations, the created business ecosystem represents an innovative urban site with an emerging identity in step with global trends. You can see this picture and understand the subject better. And as a conclusion, the modern aesthetic conclusion, the next please. As a conclusion, the modern aesthetic aspect of urban landscape is important features for development the place identity, for creating positive, friendly public spaces, and for the capitalization of the tangible heritage. The understanding of the local identity, the factors that determine it is essential condition for the elaboration of urban development strategy. The evolution and reconfiguration of the urban landscape involves the integration of the identity and aesthetic diversity of the sites and the creation of an attractive image of the city for both its inhabitants and tourists, contributing to increasing quality of life, social cohesion, and sustainable development. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Maybe honorable audience have a question.
I'd like to formulate a question. Thank you for your presentation. It was very interesting, and as a sociologist, I cannot ask such question. If you consider that there is connection and interdependencies, some interdependence between public landscape and mentality, social mentality, and if social mentality determine this public landscape or vice versa. And if there are some differences between world experience and Moldavian experience, is the same, or
Moldavian and what?
In Moldova is different than world experience, or is the same? Thank you.
Yes, can I try to respond in English or
Romanian?
Better Romanian? Probably better. Deci, vorbind despre aspectele estetice și cele identitare, da, putem spune că ele sunt într-o interdependență totală. Adică n-am putea să spunem că doar că există o dependență unilaterală, să zicem așa. Deci aspectele vizuale ale orașului fără doar și poate ne influențează mentalitatea. Eu cred că noi percepem acest lucru și de ce este important să se schimbe aspectele vizuale și inclusiv peisajul urban. În același timp, sigur că mentalitatea lasă amprenta asupra construcțiilor, da, asupra designului spațiului care ne înconjoară. Și de aceea este important să se țină cont în designul urban de mentalitatea locală, așa, pentru ca ea să fie în concordanță, să existe o armonie între mentalitatea locală și peisajul urban. Și totodată inovațiile sunt importante, pentru că vorbeați despre diferența dintre percepțiile și mentalitatea, sau mai bine zis peisajele urbane de la noi și cele din Occident, să spunem așa. Este important să fim și noi, cum s-ar spune, în pas cu trendurile actuale, în pas cu schimbările la nivel global și respectiv, iată, nu zadar am selectat acest exemplu, Digital Park, pentru ca să arătăm că de fapt, și asta am constatat prin această cercetare, că de fapt, indiferent de faptul că noi suntem totuși mai mult tradiționaliști, așa se consideră că mentalitatea noastră locală este tradiționalistă, totuși schimbările, deci la nivel global sunt interesante pentru tinerii de la noi și tinerii sunt mai deschiși pentru aceste schimbări și cred că Chișinăul are această, nu știu, vitalitate, această forță, potențial așa de schimbări și de racordare la standardele mondiale în ceea ce privește peisajele urbane. Mai ales în contextul noilor, nu știu, mijloace care se deci, alocă în transformarea urbei noastre. Ca să vă spun un exemplu recent, a venit un profesor de la Amsterdam care n-a mai fost la noi de 3 ani și spunea că ce se întâmplă, Ludmila? Chișinăul se transformă în Amsterdam, adică a simțit în 3 ani de zile o dinamică atât de rapidă, încât m-a bucurat. Noi, cei de aici, parcă nu simțim atât de mult, dar de la o parte se vede mai bine, de la distanță.
Să fie așa. Să fie așa, vă mulțumesc. Da, dear colleagues, we offer the word to Doctor of Arts Study, Mrs. Dorina Kikal-Butuciok. She represented the International Society Theatre Critics. Mrs. Dorina Butuciok will present in German language. Salutăm pe doamna doctor. Vă rugăm foarte mult. În format online.
Hallo. Heute möchte ich mal eine Präsentation, eine Geschichtsstunde in den Stücken zeitgenössischer Romantik vorstellen. Bună ziua tuturor, vreau să prezint comunicarea mea, vreau să vă spun că mă auziți.
Da. Se aude.
Geschichte mehr als einen Monat in fachzeitigen werden folgende Fragen. Welche Rolle die Kunst muss politisch sein oder nicht? Das gute das die Geschichte und Theater steht historische Perspektive ist ein inspirierendes oder ein konstruktives Element des dramatischen Imaginären des Dramatikers. Die Geschichte nähert sich den Tatsachen, wie Kunst, wie es sein können. Die Wahrhaftigkeit, die Objektivität und die Komplexität in der Konfiguration eines historischen Ereignisses könnten in einem Drama und in einem Geschichtsbuch unterschiedlich sein. Die Zeit und der Ort des Schreibens und Empfangens eines Theaterstücks und einer Chronik sind ebenso verschieden. Die Fragen, die wir uns jetzt und hier beschäftigen, sind Geschichtsdrama und Geschichtsbuch, Konkurrenz oder Komplementarität, zeitgenössisches Geschichtsdrama, Kontinuität und oder Neuheit. Okay. Wenn die Waffen reden, schweigen die Musen nicht. Das moderne historische Drama gibt den evokativen romantischen Aspekt zugunsten einer bitteren Meditation über die Geschichte auf und innoviert auf der thematischen Ebene Verfahren, Formen, Techniken. Am Schnittpunkt der Jahrhunderte entschieden sich die bessarabischen Dramatiker für Themen, die zuvor tabuisiert waren, wie der Nestkrieg von 1929. Ein Ereignis, das bereits Geschichte geworden ist, diente als Subtext für folgende dramatischen Texten. 1. Das Saxophon mit roten Blättern von Valbutnaru, Wir und Dieses Land hat uns vergessen von Konstantin Chianu, Teresboi von Mariana Starczuk und Panzer Walzer von Mina Nekit. Die Stücke in unterschiedlichen Registern geschrieben und wechseln von einem tiefgründigen Drama zu einer überwiegenden Tragödie, wobei die Mischung aus Realismus und Fiktion jedoch nuanciert bleibt. Das Stück ist zu langsam. Okay. Das erste Buch ist das Saxophon mit roten Blättern, Saxophon und Frunze Roshi di Valbutnaru von 1998. Okay. Das Saxophon mit roten Blättern ist eine Parabel auf das Schlachtfeld, das die Republik Moldau in den 80er und 90er Jahren oder vielleicht schon immer war und ist. Die Handlung des dramatischen Textes und der Aufführung im Theater Luchafro wird sofort gekündigt. Der Kolonel, der heimlich das Leben der Charaktere leitete, lädt das Saxophon, der Kontrabass und die Flöte und die Violine ein und um das Orchester zu ersetzen, das nicht aufgrund eines anonymen Kriegs kommen konnte. Nach der Entdeckung mehrerer Geheimnisse ihrer dramatischen Vergangenheit nehmen der Kontrabass, das Saxophon und die Flöte, die damals eine Jazzband bildeten und sich nun dem Singen widersetzen, die Instrumente in den Händen und die Musik klingt. Okay. Dieses Stück wurde geführt von Blättern in Theater Luchafro 1991. Regisseur Michael Fuso. Hier sehen Sie ein paar da. Das nächste Stück ist das Stück Konstantin Chianu, Wir, neu. Ein erster Versuch von politischem Theater oder Dokumentartheater der Republik Moldau. Dieses Stück wurde zusammen mit den Schauspielern geschrieben und das Szenario wird praktisch vom Prozess unserer Geschichte bestimmt. Ereignisse des 19. März 1989, dem Ausbruch der Revolution auf den Straßen von Chisinau, der Mobilisierung, dem Transnistrienkrieg, dem Fall Ilaschko und so weiter. Das wurde auch aufgeführt im Theater Luchafro 1995, auch vom Regisseur Michael Fuso. Hier sehen wir auch ein paar Bilder. Es tut mir leid, die Verbindung ist sehr schlecht. Okay, und das geht sehr langsam vor. Das nächste Stück ist ein Stück auch vom Konstantin Chianu. Land hat uns vergessen, sau țara asta a uitat de noi. Konstantin Chianu wollte das und hat das Stück wie ein Dokumentartheater über tragische Ereignisse während und nach dem militärischen Konflikt im nächsten Monat nicht. Im April 1992, während des Konflikts am Dnestr, setzten moldauische Kämpfer ein Gebäude am Standrand von Tighina. Im Dezember 2000 besetzten Ledau și Kämpfer ein neu erbautes Gebäude in der Koropceanu-Straße 1 im Zentrum von Chișinău. Das ist eine wahre Geschichte. Okay, und das Stück wurde auch aufgeführt im Nationaltheater Satiricus 2011 vom Regisseur Alexandru Crecu. Und das Stück wird noch gespielt im Theater. Hier sehen Sie ein paar Bilder. Ja.
Dear colleagues, due to awful connection with Germany, so we apologize to Dr. Dorina Halil Butuciok because we cannot listen. She's unfortunately. Maybe we can pass. If there are some questions to this presentation, to this topic. If not, we can pass to another, to next speaker. Next speaker is Cornelia Brusturianu, doctor in fine arts from National University of Arts George Enescu Iași, Romania, with communication entitled "Possibilities and Challenges for the Adoption of Sustainability Concepts in Fashion Design." Please. Display the presentation.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I want to say my presentation, if it's possible. Întrebarea mea era dacă se poate pune prezentarea pe ecran, prezentarea mea pe ecran.
Doamna doctor, imediat.
Da, mulțumesc tare mult.
Acum este doamna Brusturianu.
Brusturianu, domnule. Deconectați-o pe doamna asta și puneți pe doamna Brusturianu. Dar de ce nu deconectați? Deconectați tot pe doamna și pe urmă să fie. Deci nu e conectare pe germană.
Ar fi bine cineva să-i sugereze Catin Cănicoara să scoate camera.
Mă scuzați, vă rog să mă scuzați.
Am intervenit.
Se întâmplă.
Este vreo problemă cu prezentarea mea în partea vizuală? Nu puteți deschide?
N-are, este trimisă. Este trimisă. Este. Eu am trimis. Deci doar așteaptă ca să o conectați. Brustureanu, doamna Brustureanu.
Eu nu trimis-o, cred.
Ei, da, nu trimis. Nu trimis.
Să fac atunci de pe ecranul dumneavoastră.
Din păcate, eu nu pot partaja că aș fi făcut-o, deci nu permite platforma care, prin internetul care discutăm.
Este un Brustureanu, eu v-am trimis.
Este un fișier WeTransfer, pentru că era destul de mare.
Domnul Palaia, делайте ее презентером и пускай она покажет.
De la domnul Jabinski, domnul Vadim, eu v-am trimis. Acolo este și doamna Ana Marian, și doamna Băzgu, și Brustureanu, și doamna Madalina Vieru, toți. Eu, de la mine este.
Mă scuzați, dacă îmi permiteți, s-ar putea ca prezentarea să poată fi pusă online dacă nu este în format PPT, PowerPoint, ci PDF, pentru că probabil este foarte mare. Am citit, am făcut un research despre platformă și acceptă mai bine PDF-urile. Dacă putem să convertim, probabil așa ar putea să vină prezentarea online.
Eu am trimis formatul PDF.
Atunci înseamnă că
are
problemă tehnică.
48 de megabytes, deci nu este imens, adică nu are.
Nu e, da, ok. Am vrut să ajut, mulțumesc.
Nu, în platformă deja ați fost pusă ca prezentator. Încercați să găsiți, ați fost inclus cu dreptul de prezentator. Mai încercați odată acum.
Da, mi-apare, dar nu mi-apare să-i dau efectiv. Adică am dat selecții la Windows, dar nu mi-apare posibilitatea de a alege.
Spânzărită. Eu, te-am trimis.
Deci mi-a apărut fereastra, dar nici nu mai vrea să mai iasă de nou.
Doar o clipă.
Dar închideți conectarea.
Acuș, intră.
Nu mai văd eu fereastra lor.
Așa.
Din păcate, cu tehnologiile noastre și cu noile lucruri avem probleme și deficiențe tehnice. Ne cer scuze, dar n-am putut bine să o auzim pe doamna doctor Butucioc din Germania. Se oprea, se deconecta, conexiunea nu era, mi pare foarte rău. Dar puteți arte vizuale și acolo nu e posibil. Între timp, poate oferim cuvântul și mergem mai departe. Da, we offer the word to the doctor habilitated at political sciences, associate professor, scientific secretary at the Institute of Legal, Political and Sociological Research, main specialist in research at our academy, Mr. Serghei Sprincian.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Rector, dear colleagues, my presentation is a specific one. It is concentrated. It is about democratization perspectives through strengthening the person security culture. The key word, the key concept in my presentation will be security culture, and especially in this time when we have a war near Republic of Moldova, it is very important. Okay, please go to another slide, second slide, next. I'd like to make some, I'd like to stress here that some historical insights on democratization, and with your permission, I will say that concern for well-being of the person, for the person's freedoms, for his security, for person's safety, also for the dignity of the person, for the respect for human being, in a very general sense, was related also to Greek ancient thinkers, from the antiquity and such philosophers from ancient Greece as Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. They were interested in these problems, yes, about democratization in connection with well-being of the person. They actually laid the foundation of democratic decision-making system, because democracy means a system when decisions are taken with the majority of votes coming from ancient city of Athens. The decisions are taken with majority of vote of citizens. So these important philosophers that I mentioned found actually the principles of culture and civilization in strict relation with the need to respect human rights, private property, freedom of expression, and others. Next slide, please. In this perspective, if we are speaking about the culture of security and security of culture, it is important to mention here that from ancient times, and not only in ancient times, but also in modern times, in contemporary period of time, a lot of philosophers founded the principles of culture and civilization, especially in strict correlation with the need to respect human rights and freedom of expression in the field of culture, in a very broad context. The historical heritage and the national cultural artistic patrimony traditionally is connected to the issue of evolution of human life quality, which is a kind of premises and conditions for increasing the security of culture of a human person, and also the collective well-being of the community, of the society. Next slide, please. Of course, another key word in my presentation is the question of democratization, which is connected, strictly connected with the cultural security. And in this perspective, I'd like to mention that democratization could be perceived as a process of transition to a more democratic social and political environment in the society. It can include important social political changes and the individual social and the social level of democratic to the democratic direction. The outcome of democratization, the result of democratization in society, have to be consolidated for a sustainability of social and political reforms. To the democratization may contribute such factors as economic development, historical legacies, civil society, the strengths of civil society, and of course the international context. Because in some context, in some situation in international processes, we cannot achieve a democratization of society, especially in such regions as are which Republic of Moldova is, for example, in between east and west. We can Republic of Moldova needs to have certitude of development, and only in such conditions we can speak about democratization of the society. Also, some researchers which are concerned about the democratization phenomenon emphasize the role of elites in democratization. Also, other researchers are speaking about the importance of grassroots in the process of democratization, or with other words, democratization, according to these thinkers, it is a result of development of public interest of the civil society for better conditions in society. Next slide, please. Of course, in condition what I said already about the war in Ukraine, so the question of well-being of the human person become a very important question. And in this context, we cannot avoid to speak about culture of security and security of culture. The situation where the need of to capitalize the cultural heritage is correlated with the need of security and safety for the person, especially in the way to achieve sustainable development in the society for a long period of time. Also, here is very important to address the issue of human security in the context of changing of vectors in security policies and strategies from the old perspective of security of national security and security of state. It is important to emphasize the role of the person. Or security should be grounded, should be connected, especially with security of the person. It's impossible to speak about security of society without security of the individual. So in this context, next slide, please. In this context, it is important to speak about human security as a new theory, new perspective, new direction and evolution of security studies. And in this context, I will say that the interpersonal security and self-security in cultural and historical heritage in the context of empirical analytical perspective, among other valuable elaborations, can contribute to the diversification of the content of the conception of human security. using, of course, sociological and philosophical methods. The human security today needs to be a deep rethinking and reconsidering to be applied effectively and according to the needs and expectation of the contemporary society. Of course, the process of globalization have a big impact on the culture of security and security of culture. I will mention here that the security challenges of globalization are very profound, and they affect the human person as well, not only society, but also, of course, social communities. Also, it is important to take into account the benefits also of globalization to promote inter-civilizational and interprofessional security and dialogue. Is part of human, of course, it is a part of human security, and through globalization, especially positive aspects, we can overpass the security problems, and we see today that the causes, the motives of this awful war, what we have in Ukraine, is the lack of collaboration, lack of dialogue between two different positions, and that in this context, one part need to impose another to other nation his position, which is absolutely unacceptable from the security perspective, and especially from human security perspective. Next slide, please. Security culture is important. Next slide, please. The security culture, it's impossible to speak about security culture if we avoid to see this problem out of our risk society, which is the main characteristic of contemporary society. So in the condition of political or geopolitical crisis in Eastern Europe, especially also pandemics, but we had also pandemics for 2 years already. So this situation requires an acceleration of the process of adjustment and modernization to the imperatives of time, development of this system of ensuring human security and safety of the person, which becomes a complex and multidimensional concern in comparating and reconceptualization of the culture of personal safety and security culture, in addition to reconfiguring political and economical security, environmental security, as well the security of health, security of food or community. This aspect is becoming more and more actual in the context of development of the concept of human security in direct connection with the theory of society of risks, in which a special role is given to security of the person. Of course, in Moldova, we have several such questions, and it is connected with poverty. It's connected also with many question of national security, which is not assured, in fact. So we can see, I can stress here the possibility to overpass these problems by connection and by amplifying the European integration process for the Republic of Moldova. Finally, in conclusion, next slides, următorul slide. I can say that in conclusion, I will stress that the respect for human rights, freedoms, and security of the human person and for citizen is in correlation, in strict correlation with promotion of the sovereignty of national security of the Republic of Moldova. Of course, the promotion of human security, as I said, but also of the national specificity and cultural values of Republic of Moldova, historical heritage also becomes conditions of moralization and plenary civilization of society of Republic of Moldova's scope. Here you see some pictures from refugee crisis, so it is very important for us to mention that for Republic of Moldova, for civil society of Moldova is a kind of the crucial moment to promote his acceptance of the security of human security values. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much.
We could have some questions.
Yeah. Dear colleagues, some questions?
Thank you very much.
No?
Next.
Next. Da, noi revenim la doamna Cornelia Brusturiană, doamna doctor, a rezolvat problema, vă oferim cu drag cuvântul.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. My study entitled Possibilities and Challenges for the Adoption of Sustainability Concept in Clothing Design attempt to identify the change that will occur through the transition to a circular economy in the education and training of future fashion designer. Now, my image, please. It is a problem?
Here is.
Thank you. From beginning, please.
Yes.
Next slide, please. Next. Next. What are the current challenges in fashion design? Next, please. The first challenge is the older growing, design-driven economy and in an oversaturated marketplace, forcing designers of all backgrounds to design on contextualization their work in unique ways to stand out and appeal to customers. Next, please. Next slide, please. To meet production requirements, millions of tons of fabrics are produced each year, while customers throw away just many garments, creating an almost one-to-one ratio of garments purchased to garments thrown away. The short shelf life of garments diminish the sentimental value attached to it by customers. Clothing becomes meaningless and without emotional value. Next, please. An important challenge stems from the fact that today's customers are inundated with stuffs. Their basic needs are satisfied and often overloaded. To succeed today, designers need to change their approach for simply creating a product, developing highly complex narratives that generate new forms of communication and therefore aesthetic value. Another challenge is that it is not longer sufficient to create objects as the sole purpose. Today, a designer's creation must have a new form of value that responds to the unique practical and emotional needs of the customer. The new paradigm requires designers to shift their focus from what they do to how they do through the process of design and narratives. Next, please. The emotional needs of customers, which increase the importance of using the design framework, it's another aspect. Design needs to attract customers not only with the physical attribute of their product, but also with the cage, that intangible value, that strategical targets and satisfies the increasingly complex emotional needs of the customer. Next, please. To satisfy the emotional aspect of customers, fashion companies design, produce, and distribute products in just 20 days. This fast production system, aided by digital technology, now allows some retailers to produce 25 fashion seasons each year, offering new design for sale every 2 weeks. The relative low cost of clothing is another significant contributing factor to the high demand for products. Next, please. The globalization of fashion is also a challenge. The industry's increasing global engagement with diverse consumers who have their own unique emotional needs requires designers to understand the nuances or their markets and the subculture of those markets. Next, please. The concept of sustainability in fashion design, considering the aesthetic aspect of design alongside sustainability, can be complex. Papanex, Papanex, it's an author. This paper published in 1984 and 1995 say functional design is based on the idea that design should be the bridge between human needs, culture, and ecology. It links use aesthetic association method, will comprehend tools, materials, and processes, and with the human needs. The link of a product to time, culture, society, and nature is complemented in his later analysis with the consequences of the product on the environment to underline the need for sustainability. Next, please. According to Papanek, aesthetics should be an separated aspect of functional design. Another author, Fletcher, 21, we discussed the new aesthetics. Note that if a sustainable alternative is more attractive to consumers, they will be encouraged to accept it. All of ethical and environmental value are important to some customers. Most of them look first for aesthetic values such as style, color, and fit. For a sustainable fashion designer, this is essential. But beauty and creativity should not conflict with social and environmental responsibility. Next, please. Next slide, please. What are the coordinators of the sustainability concept? Fashion designers can play a key role in making fashion more sustainable, as they are able to influence and contribute to all levels of fashion impact: economic, environmental, social, and culture, but positive and negatives. Next. Traditionally, fashion designers up until now have been educated in Bauhaus principles, which emphasizes the practical aspect of design. They were those who shared an expertise that was based on making aesthetic and perfecting crafts. One source for this classification comes from his historical approach to fashion design education, where the emphasis has been of developing skills associated with practice, such as pattern making, garment construction, designing fashion collection, and understanding different markets. The academic curriculum focuses on existing design method and industry standards so that graduates could enter and serve to existing industry at the expense of preparing them to challenge, innovate, and revolutionize in the future the rigid status quo of the fashion design world. Next, please. Today, however, the historical role of the fashion designer needs to change from that of a vocational master who dictates personal taste to that a conceptualist or innovator who used research methodologies in the design process. Designers need to take on their new role as agents of change for the future. The new role will require fashion designers to think more critically and holistically about design if they want to innovate and improve the failing industry. Also, the role of the designer is changing to one that emphasizes conceptual thinking. The need for strong technical skills has not been alleviated. The fashion designer will still need to have the necessary technical skills and knowledge to design, but most improve their design skills by accurately conceptualizing and contextualizing the objects and persons they are designing for. In the coming years, designers need to become not only creator of aesthetically pleasing product, but also social strategies. They need to acquire skills related to understanding the psychology, social aspects, and economic elements in order to design products that respond to very specific needs in increasingly personalized market. What are the possibility of approach the concept of sustainability? A first possibility is material recycling, which can be examined in two ways. A designer can choose to use recycled materials and or create products from materials that can be recycled at the end of the product's life cycle. Recycling materials saves new materials, but requires energy to process and transform them into new materials. No, it is a way to manage waste, but not a way to reduce it. Next slide, please. A second possibility to design a garment with recycling in mind. It's a way to avoid problems, but it is a transitional strategy that is useful at society is transformed into something more conscious, sociality responsibility, and less energy consuming. A difficult goal to achieve because when developing countries become richer, they use more clothing, creating more textile waste. Next, please. Recycling is often extended to cover different types of reuse of customer products. Reuse as such for refurbishment or the most sustainable ways of dealing with used clothing, we repel is another approach. Creative use of any leftover fabric could also be considered as a way of reusing waste fabric. The concept of rent and return derives from a design concept that focuses on sustainability. Next, please. So, sustainability design in fashion so far has largely focused on recycling, but also on material selection. Several brands have developed or are in the process of developing indices that will help designer and product development teams choose material based on the environmental impact throughout the life cycle of garment. Next, please. However, sustainable design requires a more holistic perspective, taking into account not only how fashion is produced, but also how it is consumed. After all, sustainable materials will have limited impact in poor quality or poorly designing garments are only worn a few times before being thrown in a dump. Sustainable fashion design is an emergency concept that has been at the forefront of progress for decades, the need for a systematic approach for a sustainability design perspective was beyond that consider not only fashion is produced, but also how it is consumed. The essential shift towards sustainability is a broad needed conception of how a fashion designer can carry out their work and interact with customers in the future. The role of the fashion designer and how the fashion industry interacts with the customer is inevitably changing. Next, please. The fashion designers of the future. Awareness of the importance of sustainability design is the fashion industry has grown significantly over the last decade. However, tools to support sustainable design practices and encourages sustainable fashion as a co-design process from an educational perspective are not based on an effective operating system. Next, please. Contemporary fashion education requires multidimensional adjustment to the curriculum, reflecting the complex nature of sustainability issues. Fashion design education should be an opportunity to make graduates of the study program aware of the challenges and potential of design from sustainability and equip them with the knowledge and skills to implement sustainable fashion approaches. Next, please. This is a global challenge, which in the case of Romanian design faculty is further exacerbated by insufficient and uncoordinated public support, problems related to the institutional context and low levels of customer awareness of sustainability. Next slide, please. And next. To the last, to the conclusion. In conclusion, fashion does not exist in a vacuum. It is created and consumed, and therefore both the designer and the wearer are a responsibility for their decision. While there is not formal definition of sustainable fashion, nor a comprehensive guide to achieving its goals, the more thoroughly the various elements of sustainability are applied, the closer we come to generally accepted ideals of fashion. Sustainable fashion. In the current context, in-depth study of the sustainability issue is essential. While the word sustainable in fashion, in our mind, arouses a concern for the environment, natural resources and pollution, sustainable fashion is an effort that brings together sustainable development and fashion, but also takes into account and considers the social, cultural, environment, and individual well-being. Thank you very much for attention.
Și noi vă mulțumim mult, doamna doctor, pentru un raport foarte interesant. Cerem scuze încă o dată pentru deficiențe tehnice și mai departe oferim cuvântul următorului prezentator.
Dacă sunt întrebări, dear colleagues, if you have questions for the presenter. If not, next speaker is Victoria Tkachenko, but she is not connected. We have.
I am connected. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Next speaker is Victoria Tkachenko, doctor in Fine Arts, Department of Musicology, Composition, and Jazz.
Doctor in Art Studies. PhD in Art Studies. that's okay. What's going on? The sound disappeared for a while. Can you hear me?
Yes.
In order to avoid technical problems, I made a video record of my presentation together with images and sound. So please, dear colleagues, start up my presentation, my video file. Afterwards, I will answer questions if they will appear.
No.
Good morning, dear colleagues from the Academy of Music, Theatre and Fine Arts. Good morning, dear colleagues from other universities and other countries. The topic of my communication is genres of jazz origin in Moldovan music of the first half of the 20th century, ragtime by Stefan Neaga. This communication is dedicated to the initial stage of the development of jazz in Moldovan music, which covers 2 decades of 20th century. I would like to stress that due to the geopolitical and historical peculiarities of this period, the musical culture of Basarabia was a part of Romanian culture and has been strongly influenced by Romanian music, while Romanian capital Bucharest attracted many composers and performers from Moldova. Chico Aranov and Stefan Neaga were among them. For both of them, the Bucharest period was a favorable time for getting acquainted with jazz music, mastering the jazz language, trying to create their own opuses in a jazz style. However, for Stefan Neaga, it was most likely a temporary hobby, while for Chico Aranov, it was the period of his professional development as a full-fledged jazz musician, composer, and arranger. It's important to underline that Bucharest in the 1930s was a cultural center with a wide network of entertainment venues, engaging leotards, performance of classical music, different types of so-called light music, stages of theaters and cinemas, restaurants and clubs, open terraces were at the same time used as performance venues. As for the concert programs of numerous orchestras, they were mostly an eclectic mixture of folk music, popular music of the time, and arrangements of popular classics. Regularly delivered trendy records, tours by European and American jazz musicians, local recording label development formed a favorable environment for mastering the jazz language. In this context, a particular interest represents the story connected with the Bucharest period of the classic of Moldovan music, the author of the first symphonic opus and national music poem about the Dniester, Stefan Neaga. In 1931-1937, composer lived in Bucharest, studying piano and composition at the Royal Academy of Music and Dramatic Art. At the same time, he worked in restaurants in Bucharest, and apparently, in order to expand his own repertoire, he wrote Ragtime for piano. This piece has been discovered in the early 1990s by Moldovan musicologist Ion Pecuraru in the collections of one of Bucharest libraries. I would like to show you the cover page of this edition. You can see here the title, other subtitles, and the edition Ișanu, Bucharest, Calea Victoriei, so the historical center of the city. Judging by the materials available to us, the play was published, the piece was published. No worthy is the title. The composition spelled with a mistake, rectine, as a long translation from oral speech, while a subtitle, Dance Nouvelle in French, New Dance, Both inscriptions allow us to suggest that Niaga did not have access to written examples of ragtime, for instance, Scott Joplin's collections, and accumulated only auditory experience in perceiving example of this genre. And now I would like to show you the sound material and the score of this piece. As for the music materials itself, here one can see the adherence of the textural and metorhythmical features of ragtime, including the contrast of the regular accented pulsation of the bass chord type in the left-hand part and the syncopated melodic lines in the right-hand part, so-called primary rag. Regarding architectonics, some typical features for ragtime examples, including a complex three-part form with a trio-type middle section, are identified. At the same time, composer is trying to create melodic phrases in the right-hand part, which are not quite typical for this genre, based on the cultivation of non-emotional melodic construction in a percussion style. As a conclusion, we can confirm that the analyzed examples demonstrate the detailed study of the early jazz genre features by Stefan Niaga on the other hand, and his intuitive attempt to introduce some melody patterns typical for national music culture on the other hand. Thank you very much for your attention.
Noi vă mulțumim pentru comunicarea noastră și pentru relația care. Eu cred că continuarea temei este cuvântul domnului Igor Socican, doctorant, prodecan la Facultatea Arte Muzicală, care vine în același context muzical cu muzica de jazz și va prezenta stilurile jazzului clasic New Orleans în Chicago, aspecte istorice și tratarea contrabasului. Vă rugăm!
Mulțumesc! Bună ziua tuturor!
Bună ziua!
Eu aștept prezentarea să fie pornită. Gata. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished members of organizational committee. Dear colleagues, thank you for giving me an opportunity to take a speech in front of you for today. Next slide. According to jazz journalist and researcher Joachim Ernst Berendt, the New Orleans jazz is a dominant style. It spans the period between 1890 and 1928, and it's named after the place of origin, the city of New Orleans, Louisiana, United States of America. The next slide, please. Compared to other American cities, New Orleans had a substantial difference stemmed from its origin and history. Founded in 1718, this city became the largest seaport of the United States. This led to the trafficking of African slaves and also of European immigrants. Abundant migration and the development of trade have led to the cultural fusion of different groups of immigrants. Europeans, English, French, Spanish, and Africans, all of them with their traditions, influenced each other the cultural richness. A new group race, the Creoles, emerged due to the contact between the French and Spaniards with Africans. Slide number 4, please. As a result of the common musical creation between the Creoles, Africans appeared as street marching bands, while they performed ragtimes, marches, spirituals, blues, and European dances. From this stylistic and multinational mix, the New Orleans style was born. Another well-known term, Dixieland, describes the same similar features of New Orleans styles. The difference was in the ethnic one. New Orleans styles is played mainly by African Americans and Creoles, Dixieland by the Europeans. According to the multiple historical sources, the stylistic difference of the formation was the following. First one, African American bands, as shown in slide, used so-called hot complex, imitating the vocal manner of the instrument performance. The instrument parts of the approach percussively, various means of emitting sounds and introduces growl, frullato, glissando, vibrato. The call response principle often used the blue notes. The syncopation was widely used. The white or European bands superficially imitated the most obvious features of African bands, ignoring the fundamentals of style. Was used a temperate system. The rhythmic metric pulsation was very strict. It was intention to so-called correct the authentic or barbaric elements of African music. And the third one, the stylistic of the Creole bands were based on the assimilation of the musical language of Spanish, mostly of the Spanish. Among the popular instruments, characteristic of the Creole music should mean the clarinet, guitar, and violin, which were also included in bands. Most musicians have a musical education, reading skills at first sight, and knowledge of the musical theory. So if we are talking about double bass players, we can conclude that having no established tradition of playing, they used any techniques that suited the music, illustrating a surprising creativity. They play arco, pizzicato, combined the slap of the fingerboard. This was a period of active formation of style, which would later be developed in other musical styles, including jazz. The slide 6 now. The double bass is George Murphy Pop Foster, called by John Goldsby in his volume, The Jazz Bass Book, Technique and Tradition. The father of the jazz double bass demonstrates the application of combination of all above mentioned techniques of play. Thanks to him, the tuba was replaced by the double bass. He has collaborated with such personalities like Louis Armstrong, King Oliver, Sidney Bechet, and many others. As an example of the use of various techniques, we can refer to the tune Mahogany Hall Stomp, composed by Spencer Williams and performed by the Louis Armstrong and his orchestra on March 5th of 1929 in the Savoy Ballroom 5, New York. Put the next slide, please, but wait a minute. Yes. This song represents a 16-measure blues in E-flat and has the following form. Intro consisting from the 4 measures. The theme is repeated twice. For improvisation by various instrumentalists, including Louis Armstrong, they switched to the 12-measure blues form. An outro consists from the 4 measures, same as intro. Please connect the first, no, put the next slide, yes, and Pop Foster arco, please, put on. Mission Impossible. audios, I have to perform and show how Foster used his techniques in the first part of this tune. He is bowing. Which note it is used a quarter, and the accents are made on the first and third beats of the measure. No? Okay, I saw that we can connect the audio, and also I wanted to say that in this audio examples, I try to show what kind of different techniques was used in this early music of. You can, yeah. The rhythmic and melodic accompaniment is characteristic to a European polka. The next style, which was developed in that period, also called classical jazz, is a Chicago jazz, so-called. This is an independent style, and in the development of jazz, which developed an imitation of so-called black jazz by white musicians, which originally influenced by New Orleans jazz. Put the next, yes. Chicago style is characterized by substitution of collective improvisation by solo series and the transformation of musical composition into a set of solo improvisations based on the figurative development of the song on the harmonic chorus. The accent on second and fourth beats of the measure. The composition of the ensemble, the trumpet replaced the horn, the double bass tuba. The guitar was introduced for the first time, and saxophone began to be more significant in this music. The typical example of the Chicago style is the next, please. Is a tune called Jazz Me Blues, performed by Frank Teschemacher's Chicagoans, composed by Jane Krupa. In this table, we can show the structure of this piece in sections, because it was the first style which can start, the first style of jazz, which was started to divide the piece in tune in sections. It's noticeable that compared to New Orleans jazz, the role of the instruments involved in the interpretation are well established. Each group fulfills its tasks. The soloist is always on the forefront. The recent section comprised guitar and double bass, play the rhythm patterns similar to New Orleans styles, but the accompaniment is not a collective improvisation, as I say. The interpretation is a harmonic and rhythmic foundation for the soloist. Please, next slide. 10. The rhythmic difference between the accents made by this section and the solos give a lively feeling of the music. The bass line and the repertoire are steadily on the first and third beats of each measure, and it is interacted with the guitar at each beat. Part B of this piece is a length, with the length of 4 measures, is rather an interlude linking parts R and C. In part C, double bass has play walking bass lines at each beat of the measure. The choice of bass accompaniment sounds through the piece is the root and fifth of the corresponding chord. I can say that importance on the Chicago styles lies implementing the tradition between New Orleans and swing styles. Thank you for hearing me, and if you have any questions, please.
Thank you for the presentation. This was very interesting. If you have some question to
Dear colleagues, please.
Questions? No questions. Okay, in this case, we'll pass to another presenter. Thank you very much. Next, we'll present his communication, Alexander Roshka, Doctor in Science and Political Sciences, University lecturer, about pandemic theater experiments, the theater of quarantine, his study. So, Dr. Roshka is connected, please.
Nu, el vorbește așa, el n-are.
He have no presentation, just he will speak.
Da, comunică așa.
Only communication. Alexander, if you hear us, please make a sign.
Yeah, Mr. Smith, I can hear you.
Dați-o pe tot ecranul.
Conectați sunetul. Este.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Dear colleagues, we have 15 minutes till the break because according to the program, we should have a break at 12:30. And we have two presenters more, Alexander Roshka and Florin Pânzariu from Romania. So, Alexander Roshka, we ask you to present your communication in not more than 7 minutes, please. Thank you.
Lăsăm Daniel Pânzariu și el se conecteze în poate. Și noi e posibil.
Okay, if we understood correctly, the Alexander Roshka is cannot connect from mobile device or not? He's connected? Yes. Okay, please. You have the floor.
Excuse me. Can you hear me?
Yes, we are hearing you.
Okay, if you can hear me, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure, my honor to be with you today, and my presentation is about theater in quarantine. Previously, I have contributed an article about different ways that theater took during lockdown times, and one of those phenomena I've described was the so-called Zoom plays. And one of my conclusion was that a lot of people at the same time that it would be very original, like to do Zoom plays about their ordinary routine, and it all transformed theater into some kind of talking heads, boring stuff about daily routine, like what is life in lockdown look like. And I mean, at some point that started looking like really boring, and the artistic community was taking action against that. But actually, there were exceptions from this pattern, and one of those exceptions, in terms of how much artistry it can be to COVID theater, was the so-called theater in quarantine from New York. So actually, to give you an idea of what that thing was like,
Ceva azi cu arta teatrală nu le merge. Unul de pe internet, altul de acasă.
Alexander, we won't hear you. It seems we have some technical problems. Okay, I propose to pass to another presenter,
Mr. Florin Pânzăriu.
Florin Pânzăriu, doctor in visual arts from National University of Arts George Enescu, Iași. Alexandru, if you can reconnect, and after this we will give you possibility to finish your presentation. Thank you very much. Okay, please, Dr. Florin Pânzăriu, if you hear us, you can.
Hello, everyone.
You can take the floor, please. About wars of images.
You are now presenter. You can list your slides by errors.
Yes, I see. Thank you. In this study, I propose a brief analysis of methods and channels used in communication through graphics or photographic images, often of political nature, both in a peaceful and belligerent context. We will face the ethical issue of the visual images, messages manifested in the area of institutional or state propaganda, or in the private field. Often, this type of message image can be included in the communication phenomenon called propaganda. Charles Larson in 2003 points out that the meaning of the term propaganda has varied over time from the initial institutional meaning of promoting doctrine, including the doctrine itself, and the communication techniques used for this purpose, later becoming an ethically neutral concept of mass persuasion campaign. In other definition, propaganda is considered an immoral practice caused by the intentional use by the communicator of the suggestion by presenting false evidence in order to impede the process of analysis and the decision making by the recipients. We also notice in Larson's study the variation of the ethical connotation of this term. Depending on the intention and the way in which the specific technique for fulfilling the purpose are applied in the message. Having this time as a reference the source and purpose of the message, Zbigniew Zeman in 1978 identifies three archetypes of this phenomenon. White propaganda, the first, through which the communicator openly declares his purpose and the source of the message. The gray propaganda, where the source and purpose are ambiguous. And the reprehensible black propaganda that misleads the receiver, giving the impression that the message is being issued by opposing camp. From these perspectives, I propose a brief contextual highlighting of the methods and the techniques by which these visual communication have acted and continue to certify, convince us, persuade, validate controversial actions, manipulate, in other words, influence our decision and beliefs, from currents of opinions through information or misinformation, defining the centers of influence. Graphic images have actively participated beneficially or harmfully in the propagation of the doctrines of the last century and make their presence felt in contemporaneity. A good example of white propaganda reference is Alfred Leeds' recruitment poster, Lord Kitchener wants you, in which we can easily identify the communicators and the context of the visual communique. Mobilization poster taken over and adapted by the United States through Uncle Sam Wants You poster created by J.M. Flagg. Use it both in First War and the Second War. More recently, poster campaign from 2008 for election of the President of the United States propose certifying the candidate Barack Obama as a symbol of change. The poster creator Shepard Fairey published the poster without being mandated by the candidate. The public release on behalf of the candidate pins this image in the area of gray propaganda, especially in the homage version for the Occupy Wall Street movement, in which the artist replaced the image of President Obama with a portrait of the symbol of the anonymous group, Guy Fawkes mask, adding the word hope, pointing, Mr. President, we hope you are on our side. Street artists also modified the campaign logo by introducing the 99%, including the cause of Occupy Wall Street movement in the message. This time, too, he falsely pretended being the communicator of the intended movement, promoted the message of a possible collaboration between the organization and the president. Despite his good intention, Fairey generated a wave of criticism after launching the image on his personal blog, because the message does not correspond to the Declaration of Autonomy that the movement acclaimed. The impression of hope in a partnership with the presidential institution being disavowed. In the case of belligerent projects, the authorities have to solve when planning or facing a conflict situation a key issue. That of obtaining the support of the majority of the population in the course of developments. For the aggressor, planning involves spotting or choosing an enemy and promoting his image as an enemy of national interests. This process takes time and must cover all media channels and can be considered a hate-building process. This goal requires capturing and controlling all channels of information dissemination and the feature of authoritarian as a feature of authoritarian regimes, and only when opinion polls indicators simulate popular support can the leadership initiate the belligerent project. In the case of the assaulted part, achievement of cohesion of the masses is easier, but it still requires coordination and coherent attitude on the part of the leadership. We can identify in the historical graphic images of war propaganda a certain communicative pattern. The tendency and the obvious intention to demonize the enemy, presenting him either in an ironic, caricaturate way or through monstrous personification. We can find the caricature in the few World War II posters published in the United States after the attack of Pearl Harbor, which depicts defamatory and xenophobic images of Prime Minister Hideki Tojo. The visual elements are joined by the design of the poster text with the intention of stigmatizing and ridiculing the poor English spoken by Japanese. Sergei Mikhailovich Eisenstein enshrined methods of demonization in the film The Potemkin Cruiser, also decrypted by Professor Roger Stahl in a Deutsche Welle interview in 2022. He observed that there are basic strategies for demonizing enemies. They are usually filmed from below, look threatening, often embody death or abstraction of it. Sometimes they appear as a personified parasite or other animals that are easily demonized or killed. Unfortunately, these days we are feeling the consequence of a new conflict in Europe, which has amplified the aftershocks of the imagery conflict as part of the information war. And every image published needs to be carefully analyzed, take it into account as many and reliable sources of information as possible, and approaching an overall analysis of the war imaginary machine. We observe a different perception of aggressor spotting among opponents, We can also observe narratives that are intended only for internal consumption or for the opposing camp, fake and deep fake news, reaction and counter-reaction that create a hermetic and rigid framework unsuitable for dialogue. For example, how could we decipher the famous press photo of President Emmanuel Macron's meeting with Vladimir Putin? The long table has taken on multiple possible interpretation. Maybe social distancing caused by COVID-19, keeping a possible enemy at a distance, creating an imperial framework. We can't be certain of the meaning as long as we don't know what was intended or whether a subliminal component was intended to be communicated. Certain is the private or institutional worldwide reaction to these images. Immediately, meme interpretation appears to ridiculing the framework. We can also distinguish the image approach of two belligerent entities. The defensive side imagery focus on persuasion through credibility, through all three channels, competence, charisma, and sincerity, but also by appealing to the emotional factor. On the other side, we can see the concentration of the messages almost exclusively on authoritative and emotional level. In conclusion, images dissemination channels have evolved over time in tandem with existing technologies at the time. Whether they are published through posters, placards, or through other printed materials, or through contemporary electronic formats, we need, as recipients, to try to identify the real communicator of the message, the context of the communication, and last but not least, the purpose of the communication. Because we shouldn't contribute to the amplification and spread of deceptive messages with a hidden purpose. Whether we are targeted by political or private messages, we are forced to filter in the most rational possible way all the graphic images with which we are assaulted. Thank you very much for your attention.
Please, we have questions from our presenter? No? Okay. In this situation, we finished the program of plenary session, and I want to give the word to Mrs. Vice Rector, please.
Onorată asistență, stimați colegi, trebuia să participe la conferința noastră doamna Olga Oleksiuc din Ucraina, Kiev, dar mi-a trimis mesaj că din cauza bombardamentelor care au avut loc în această seară, nu poate să se conecteze și nu va fi, din păcate, prezentă. Va trimite comunicarea în zilele care urmează până în data care a fost indicată. Eu țin să mulțumesc tuturor colegilor care s-au conectat la manifestarea noastră și vreau să mulțumesc pentru acele teze care ați binevoit să le trimiteți Și pe această cale mulțumesc pe doamna director a bibliotecii noastre, responsabilă pentru editarea acestor teze, doamna Rodica Vasiloae, care a lucrat foarte mult pentru a organiza aceste volumuri de teze. Astăzi avem un volum pânăcel, dar o să vedem pe parcurs, o să mai facem unele restructurări. Vă mulțumim foarte mult, doamnă director. Ele sunt plasate deja pe site-ul nostru, dar o să mai obținem niște cifruri și o să fie peste câteva zile, peste o săptămână, plasate cu cifrul ISBN. Încă o mulțumire foarte mare pentru susținere care o avem de la doamna director și de la doamna vicedirector cu organizarea acestei expoziții unde se evidențiază activitatea științifică a cadrelor didactice, a cercetătorilor Academiei de Muzică, Teatru și Arte Plastice. Suntem bucuroși pentru faptul că avem o prezență nu numai din cadrul instituției noastre în acele lucrări științifice, dar și din alte instituții din țară și de peste hotare. De aceea suntem bucuroși pentru colaborare, vă mulțumim din suflet și așteptăm până în data de 15 mai lucrările dumneavoastră. Și mai avem o expoziție frumoasă, dacă observați dumneavoastră, de arte plastice, care a binevoit Facultatea de Arte Plastice să prezinte astăzi la conferința noastră, în persoana domnului prodecan Ion Jabinski, a facultății și șefa departamentului de arte decorative, doamna Elena Frunze, cu aceste lucrări care au dat o căldură frumoasă aceste săli în care a ținut lucrările conferința noastră. Acum urmează, desigur, o pauză, dar la ora 13 noi vă așteptăm în continuare să lucrăm pe secțiuni. Avem 3 secțiuni: arta teatrală, arta muzicală, arta teatrală, cinematografică, coreografică și secțiunea 3, științe socio-umanistice și culturologie, împreună cu artele plastice, decorative și design. Încă o dată, mulțumiri foarte mari. Ne scuzați pentru aceste deficiențe tehnice, credeți-ne că nu din cauza noastră, fiindcă nu se conectează la prezentare din telefon mobil. Și din alte aspecte care nu trebuiau să fie și nu sunt de dorit. Dar până la urmă, noi continuăm lucrările noastre și vă dorim succes. Nu mi-au rămas buni. Nu mi-au rămas buni.
Mulțumim!
Thank you for participation. 1 o'clock. Section.